Okay, if we start bringing it back in, we'll get going again. I know, you guys are so I'm used to working with young people where you have to say that about 5 times and then you just start. All right. So, I know there's a couple of us already, but did anybody already send a text to somebody? I think we need to give a round of applause. Well done. Well done. Seriously, loads of good stuff happened last weekend at our church weekend away. The best thing that happened was these texts that we sent, and people are starting to talk. So, and I think someone already got a response. So, they didn't ghost you. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm very busy, but a coffee would be lovely.
Great. Well done. Well done. So yeah, here we go. We'll do another little chunk here. We'll get you working and talking again. We'll have a proper break in 45 minutes or so, depending on how we're doing. But you guys are doing great. You're tracking. I think you're understanding. We're on the same page. That we often get stuck sharing our faith because we have a mindset that we kind of have to corner somebody or trick someone into a conversation, get all the truth out in one go, and get to Jesus. And hopefully they pray a prayer, and that's what success is. And I think we're on the same page of, you know what, God still uses that. God still uses those encounters on the street when we go out as street pastors or go on mission. There are still people searching that are in the harvest stage that God uses us to call to faith. However, in general, our culture is starting back here. So it made sense in the past decades because at school, people were hearing the Bible stories. Most people were familiar with church or probably went to church at least at Christmas and Easter. So they had a God consciousness. They had an overall understanding of the Bible and our sin problem. So our job as evangelists was really to call people to make that personal, right? It's not just a history book lesson. It's not just a museum exhibit. That message is for you. And so it made sense to start there with Jesus. Do you want to follow Jesus? But like we've been saying, overall, in general, the people around us that we see every day are starting from a very different standpoint. So we're not, one conversation most of the time is not going to make sense to people. We've got to take a slow down process approach. All right, the second reason we often get stuck, and we're already hinting about this, is people are starting from a very different point, and they're actually not all that interested in God and faith. Great for you. I think in the back you said, it's great for you. I'm not in the market for God. It would be like my neighbor rolling up in a brand new Mercedes and telling me what a great experience he had at the dealer and what a great price he got and how fun it was to drive it. And, you got to go get... And I'm not in the market for a Mercedes. I'm glad you have a Mercedes. I drive a Vauxhall Zafira, so I'm not in the market for a Mercedes. I think people kind of feel that same way of... So we get stuck because we don't know where people are starting from, and the fact that most people are apathetic or indifferent, okay? Now, I should also say, if you're wondering, how do I help people move through all 5 of those stages, there's lots of actions and lots of things we can do. We're not going to unpack that this morning. At the end, we'll share with you some online videos. We'll tell you about that, and you can learn more about those stages, all those 5 stages, but we want to keep going back to the beginning. So we don't understand where people in our world are starting from when it comes to faith. So we can spend a lot of time answering questions that people are not yet asking. So if we start with, do you want to follow Jesus? It's like, I'm not even interested in God. I'm not even pursuing that. So I don't know who Jesus is or why I should be interested in him. And we ran into this whole answering questions people aren't asking. We ran into this a lot in our youth work. So we've worked in the schools, mentoring and putting on lunch clubs, taking some assemblies. We started a drop-in at Costa Coffee on our high street, and we would gather young people, build relationships with them, and then invite whoever wanted to come explore faith, and specifically explore the Christian faith. And early on, and this was based on our mission training again, early on when we'd get all the young people in a room, we would talk about how we know the Bible is really credible and how the Bible is true. And we talk about these reasons we have that are good reasons to know that God actually exists. And we talk about Jesus and say, this is why we have really good evidence that Jesus was a real person that lived 2,000 years ago, and the miracles are true, and he actually did die, and he actually did rise from the dead, and he actually can save us from our sins. And so we thought, if we talk about it naturally, and if we kind of show all the good reasons we have to believe what we believe, then that will help young people come to faith. And what we found was young people weren't against it. It was just kind of meh. That's the young people phrase. Meh. Great, but I'm not really interested in that. Alistair McGrath puts it this way. Something may be true, but possess little, if any, relevance. And that's the slide you saw. The relevancy barrier. In our experience working with young people, in our experience with talking with our neighbors and our friends, and the parents of our daughters' friends, is people are just largely indifferent and apathetic. They're not looking for God. They're not interested in faith. So how can we help them get interested is the big barrier we've faced for a long time. And that's what Alistair McGrath, just because we have this great truth, and it is true. The gospel is true, and all those things I just said about the Bible and Jesus and the resurrection are true. But Alistair McGrath talks about it in his book, Narrative Politics. He said it's like if I told you that in such and such a country, X amount of inches of rain fell in the year 2022, we'd all be like, well, yeah, that's probably true, but so what? Or he talks about his friend who has this great stamp collection. He wants to invite him over and show him his stamps. And he's like, yeah, not really interested in stamps. Not my thing. Have you guys heard about Youthscape? Anyone in the room heard of Youthscape? They're a big youth resourcing agency in Luton. Have lots of great stuff. They commissioned a really big piece of research a few years back. I think they spent quite a bit of money on it as well. And they wanted to survey young people and ask them their questions about God, about life, about faith. So our friend Chris Curtis, who directs Youthscape, was telling us about this. And he said, we got all the young people in the room. We were ready for this big survey. And the young people basically just looked at us and said, we don't have any questions about those things. And he said it was like, what are we even going to talk about? And Youth for Christ did a similar piece of research not long ago and found that this generation, and I don't think we're just talking about young people, friends. I think this goes beyond teenagers. I think this is the general place our culture, Western culture, is at. Neutral on matters of faith. How many of us watched the coronation on TV? Yeah? Anyone actually go down to London to see it? Okay. We get sucked in. I say, well, I'm not going to watch it. We just had the Jubilee and the funeral. I'm not going to watch this one. And you get sucked in, don't you? And so we watched the coronation, and we watched the parade, and there was a moment just when the parade went around the roundabout by Buckingham Palace and started going through the gates. And there was the BBC commentator sitting in that little glass deal. And the historian, David, I forget his last name. I can't pronounce it correctly anyway. They were asking him, is there a place for a monarchy in today's society? Is there a place for a monarchy? And the historian said, well, that's why events like this coronation are so important, because indifference is the kryptonite to a monarchy. And I would say the same thing about faith and God. Indifference is kryptonite, because it stops a spiritual journey before it can ever get started. So we need to understand where people are starting, and we need to understand people aren't asking a lot of questions about God and faith, but we need to understand the questions they are asking. And the questions people today are asking are extremely practical. They're the relevance questions rather than the truth questions. They're the why. Why should God matter to me? Why would faith help my life? And I'll tell you a story about this tomorrow in the sermon. We need to focus on the motivation for the gospel, not just the information of the gospel. Why should I be interested in pursuing that? And again, we didn't do exercise 1B. That was a bonus for you that maybe some of your mission groups can do in their own time. But it's interesting. I can see us all nodding, and we agree this is where our culture is starting. Far from God, indifferent, not asking a lot of questions. And this is controversial, but most of our mission and outreach programs are, let us answer your questions about Jesus. Now, we love Alpha. We help lead Alpha. Our church uses Alpha. Alpha is great. But more and more, our culture is back here. Our young people are here. They're not asking questions about Jesus. They're not asking any questions. So how do we start here and hear the questions they're asking or not asking and help them do this? Okay? How do we do that? We'll keep unpacking that. Joy, I think you also want to talk about another reason why people are just indifferent.
Yes.
And apathetic.
Okay. Great. So Darren and I have 2 teenage daughters at home who I hope got up and walked the dog this morning. Poor little doggy. And I just want to start with a story about something that happened with one of our daughters at school. She was probably about 13. And she came home and told us this story, that day in physics, I know 13-year-olds can be a handful. And they must have gotten a little out of hand, and someone was sneezing regularly, and people kept saying, bless you, bless you, bless you. And I'm sure it was a bit trying, possibly, for the teacher. However, they must have pushed him just far enough that he stood up in front of the class and he said, "Stop saying bless you. You do not have souls." And went on with the class. And Ella came home and told us this. So I tell you that story because the reality is that our young people are coming out of their education with a lot of influences like this physics teacher who is helping them to learn this message, 2 messages, and I don't even think this is in your notes right here, but first of all, that in general, science has kind of disproven God. That's one big message that they're getting. And the other one is that you're just a body and a brain. Okay, so this is where I will start to fill in your notes. We need to understand people's bent because of what they're being educated in, things like this that happened to our daughter. They're bent towards naturalism and materialism. And this false dichotomy that's been created in our culture that science and faith are against each other, when in reality, they do not have to be against each other. So number one, our young people are learning naturalism, that only natural laws and forces are at work in the universe. Only natural laws and forces are at work in the universe. And then its partner, materialism, that nothing exists except for matter, its movements, and its modifications. And so that's a real technical language. The way that Darren and I have learned to describe it is people believe that they are only a body and a brain. Or at least that's what they come out of their sciences believing. Okay? You are chemicals, forces, and matter. And that's the whole of what it means to be human. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about it. Many people haven't thought very deeply about this, but it's just kind of prevalent there under the surface. Okay?
So that's led to the indifference, the naturalism, materialism. Another interesting shift in our culture, Western culture, is how people decide what's true. And again, in the past, during the modern era, we won't go into a history lesson, and you can hear this in some of our early approaches with our youth ministry. We tried to use proofs, and we tried to use logic, and we tried to debate whose truth is more true, or who's got the better evidence. And that really worked for a big slice of human history, kind of from the 1500s until recently. But there's been a big shift. We won't go into all the factors, but basically the way people decide today what is true is very different than the last several centuries. People today decide what's true by experience. Is it true for me? And again, if you look at some of the recent, we could spend a whole morning on this, but at Youthscape they talk about the experiential approach to mission and sharing faith is really, really key these days. We've got a favorite quote that we've seen on Instagram recently. I don't trust words, I trust vibes. People can tell you anything. People can tell you whatever their truth is, right? But a vibe tells you everything. And that scares some of us logically minded people. And I'm not up here saying that we don't have truth that's objectively true. We do have truth that's objectively true. It's just the way we're going to help people be motivated to explore faith. With most people today, now not everybody, we do live near Oxford. There's still some very intellectual, educated people who engage their brain that way first. But more and more people are deciding through experience. So the question is, how can we help people experience their way into a relationship with God? All right, so because of all these factors, because of indifference, because of the types of questions people are not asking and questions they are asking, because they decide what's true through experience, because we've kind of numbed our culture to the supernatural because of, materialism, naturalism, because of all that, we really believe we need to find new starting points for gospel conversations. People are starting somewhere different. We need to find new starting points if we want to engage people in faith conversations. So how can we do that? How can we find new starting points that help people experience their way into a relationship with God? And here's like the guts of our whole thing. So if you don't hear anything else this morning or tomorrow when we're with you, we really believe that we're in a missionary situation where we need to start by stirring curiosity and learning how to overcome that relevancy barrier or overcome that indifference. And we know, guys, there's loads of things that go into sharing the gospel. It's the Spirit moving, it's praying, it's building relationships. I think most people will come to faith through a relationship with a real life Christian rather than someone standing at a podium in a church or in a stadium. The Spirit has to move. So we know that stirring up curiosity is just a small slice of what it takes. But for us, it's been the major thing we've had to figure out in our context because of just the apathy and indifference. And we've learned with the young people we work with our neighbors and friends who are not Christians, that we can stimulate curiosity and get gospel conversations going if we understand and realize that every human being is a spiritual being. We could say every human has a soul, but I think it's more accurate to say every human is a soul. And even though we're told that we're just a body and a brain, every single person has, and we talked about this earlier, every person has these longings and these questions that I don't think can be explained by our body and brain alone. And those longings cannot be satisfied within the confines of this life or in the confines of my own self. And we know that. Like, on the one hand, we have the surface level belief, it's just physical matter, we're here by chance, science has disproved God. But there's something happening here under the surface where I don't really believe that. So it's about trying to stir those things up. So Joy, you're going to take us through a few statements, right? Sorry, we're playing musical chairs here.
All right, so even though there is this surface level belief in naturalism and materialism, the reality of a godless universe doesn't really match people's lived experience. Okay, so let me go through these, and I think they're all in your notes. The reality is, we don't really believe that the strong should thrive and the weak should die. That's not what our culture believes. We believe in helping the least. We believe in looking outside of our own tribe and showing kindness. We have what C.S. Lewis calls the law of decent behavior running through all of us. Okay, we don't really believe that the strong should thrive and the weak should die. Secondly, we don't want to accept a reality that is the result of chaos and random chance. So if we only have a naturalistic or materialistic view of the world, we need to be a lot more comfortable with chaos and random chance, because that's what drives that worldview. But we're not. We're not okay with chaos and random chance. And our longings of our souls show repeatedly we have desires to control our environment. The three lads, or the lad that Darren is walking with through the town center and tells him, I'm going to score 3 goals today because I saw 3 magpies. Okay, it's funny, but it is just a little bit of evidence of that longing inside of us of trying to control the chaos around us. The story of our neighbor who wouldn't take the mirror off the wall when they repainted their house is a true story, okay? Because they didn't want to bring bad luck into their life. And so Darren said, well, I'll take your mirror off your wall. You know, they didn't want to break it. Yeah. So there's these longings under the surface to have control, not chaos and random chance. Number 3, we want love and beauty and our choices to be real, not dictated by matter or hardwired into us for the purpose of survival. You know, the reality is, if we are only dancing to our DNA, as one famous atheist has put, then the beauty and the love that you experience, they're not real. They're just the chemicals in your brain responding to stimuli in order to help you survive. But we don't believe that, do we? We don't live that way. We believe the beauty that we see is real. The love that we share is real. And the last one, we want to know that our lives mean something and that our lives have a purpose. So we need to start to be able to articulate how a naturalistic or materialistic view of the world doesn't match our lived reality, because we have longings boiling underneath there that tell us maybe we are more than a body and a brain. And we're going to keep unpacking that. If you're like, okay, I'm starting to get it, we're going to keep unpacking that.
Yeah, stay there, Joy, because I think we'll just jump right into your next things. But
okay.
Again, our starting point of overcoming this indifference or the irrelevancy is to help people see their true spiritual identity. What's true about us is we are spiritual beings. And evidence of that is these longings of the soul, these wanderings of the soul. So Joy's just going to quick take us before our break. We've got 7 or 8 minutes. Joy will zip through these. We'll give you a little exercise that's just drawing some lines, and we'll take our break. But yeah, these are the common longings that we keep coming back to, that we see functioning on a daily basis, that we can point to. And then if we can stir up those longings, it helps people see, maybe you're right. Maybe I am more than a body and a brain. Maybe there is a spiritual component to me, and we know that's like your whole thing is spiritual, not just a part of you. So what are these common longings? Go for it, Joy.
All right. So common stirring points that we have conversations with people around, or we're looking for. We have our antenna up and we're trying to have these conversations, okay? Number one is around origins. Everyone wonders at some point, how did we get here? Okay? And I just want to point out, when you're in stage 1, you're not really looking to talk about whose theory on creation versus evolution is true. That is important. Truth is important, but at this point, you're just trying to say, we wonder about these things. My dog doesn't wonder about where we came from. What is unique about us as humans that we wonder about things like where did we come from? The next stirring point, is there someone or something more? We wonder, are we alone in the universe? And we long to know there is someone or something out there who can help us. We long to know there's someone or something out there that can help us. Another stirring point we use regularly is around justice. We long for the world to be good and for people to be kind to each other. Where does that longing come from? If we live in a universe that's just being driven by survival, the strong thrive, the weak die, why do we have this moral thread running through the middle of us that we long for the world to be good and for people to be kind to each other? Prayer is one that we stir around a lot. People long to connect with someone or something bigger than themselves. Darren's like a street pastor when he walks our dog, because he's got all these other dog walkers that come to him and say things like, you pray, right? I'm not religious, but you pray, right? and he gets into these conversations where he can then say, I think that you're longing to pray or connect with someone bigger than yourself. I think that shows there's a part of you that's spiritual, that you have a soul, okay? Those kinds of conversations. Another stirring point, we long to know that this life means something. And most people still hope for the next life. Now, I know your atheists that you see online will say, this is the end of life, and that's it, and I'm fine with it. I just want to remind you, I think that's a very small, bold number of people. I think the people that you have written on your paper probably hope that there's a next life. Why do we hope that there's a next life? Where does that longing come from if we are just bodies and brains? Superstition. We touched on this several times. We can't bear to believe that life is down to random chance. And we long to have some sense of control in our lives. And some people have this more than others. Another stirring point is worship. We long to be part of something bigger and cast our affection on someone greater. So our daughters just went to, what's his name? Harry. Harry Styles. Sorry, I'm so not into their music. I went to Harry Styles' concert in Coventry a couple weeks. Yeah. Did any of you go see Harry in Coventry? No. Yes, they did. Yes. And it's really interesting that we have two daughters, and our older daughter at 18 is now just, she loves Jesus, and she loves his church, and she loves to go and worship. And this is just a new development in the last year or so. God's really been working in her life. And she also is our daughter, and we've dragged these poor girls around to quite a few of sessions like this that we would maybe do on a Sunday morning, and they've come along with us, and they have been hearing about how to start to stir for a couple years now. And she came home from seeing Harry Styles, and she said, was really interesting because I get to go to church every Sunday and throw my affection on God. And I need to do that every week. But I could just see in that stadium, it was filled with all these girls who have these longings to throw their affection on something.
Picture too of like girls down on the floor doing that.
Yeah, she took a picture, he says, of people almost prone in worship of Harry Styles, okay? And she could see at 18 years old, they have a longing to throw their affection on someone that they deem to be great, right? And she could see also how I get to do this on a regular basis and feed that longing that I have in a true and real way. And it maybe took a little bit of the edge off of her fun at Harry Styles. But the last one is awe and wonder. You know, we have experiences on a regular basis where we come up over a mountain that we're hiking, and we see this beautiful vista, and it's quiet, and we have this serene moment where we take in all the beauty, and we have this sense of satisfaction that things are right in the world, and there's more, and I feel connected to it. Now that moment doesn't last very long because then the tourists also come over the mountain and the moment is gone. But we love that moment of feeling I'm satisfied, I'm complete, there's more and I'm connected to it. Awe and wonder. We long to hold on to that feeling of peace and satisfaction that all is right with the world. So these are topics that we stir around often. So now I'm going to go through them a little bit quicker, one more time, and I'm going to show you how we would use these stirring points to point out the soul or the spiritual. How will we kind of have those kind of conversations, okay? So that's where I'm going to go next. Stirring sounds like. This is what stirring sounds like in those areas. What's your current, so under origins, what's your current thought about how we got here? Why do you think we wonder about these things? Why do you think we wonder about these things? Under someone or something more, why do you think humans look outside of themselves for help? If we are only physical beings, if there are only natural forces that work in the world, why do you know this? In the war, every soldier prays, right? Looking for help for something from someone outside of himself. And that's the experience we have with some of these people, especially these dog walking friends that Darren meets all the time, is they want him to pray for them because they know he's religious. And so he turns it back and says, well, why do you think you're looking for help from outside of yourself? I think that maybe that shows that you have a spiritual part. So why don't you try to pray to God? Okay, so that might be how that would go. The afterlife. So here's how we stir on that. Why do you think we want our lives to mean something? Or hope that they mean something, or hope that there's a next life? Awe and wonder. What do you think that feeling of satisfaction is? Where does it come from? I think it shows a desire to connect with someone bigger than yourself. Or we'd say, I think that might be your soul in action, right there. And then we might ask, do you think these longings can be explained by our body and our brain alone? Or could we be spiritual beings? All right. I know that was a lot, and it might be a new way of thinking about things. Are we going to do our exercise first and then take our break?
Let's take a break first.
Okay. He's thinking I need to give you a break. Great. We're going to take a break, keep those thoughts around, and we'll come back and do our exercise. 15 minutes.
15 minutes, so 15, 20. We got plenty of time.